the questions I get asked a lot is, when will the higher education bubble pop? And I wrote an article, I think it was about 4 years ago, and one of the things that kind of annoys me about people writing about the education bubble is they tend to predict it's probably going to happen in the next 5 years or so. And the reason why that annoys me is because you can only look at the trends and what's happening and say it's going to pop in the future when these things occur, kind of like the housing bubble. In other words, when the level of income is not enough to sustain and you have pressure on income, you don't have enough money to pay your mortgage, or that becomes the expense to cut, like oil prices going high. So nobody really knows a specific, let's say, year that it's going to happen. Maybe people are just best guessing, but there are signs and trends to look for. So we're going to look at 6 trends that to watch for. And by the way, if you're, let's say, a trader or you're in finance, there's a lot of shorting opportunities here. For instance, there's a lot of business you can't directly short, like Harvard College that I know of. Maybe you can. But you can short companies that do business with Harvard, right? Likewise, you can short, let's say, McGraw-Hill as a case in point, just as an example, who produces a lot of textbooks, right? In other words, if schools start getting, cut and start doing laying off. And by the way, before people sit there and they talk about how evil, shorting or whatnot is, these are companies who've been ripping off students for a long time. I feel no pain for them and charging $300 a textbook, and then when the student literally a year later, or a semester later, goes back to sell it, they're like, oh, we'll give you $40 for that. What? A $260 profit cut. Oh, and then a new edition's out of the book, so it's no longer good. Yeah. That's called a young person tax. They're taxing the young people. It's just a ripoff. Anyway, the whole school system is corrupt, so you'll get what you deserve, because when people are shorting you and betting against you, you're going to get it when it comes back to you. And I'm not going to feel sorry for you, because you shouldn't have ever done that to begin with. Corrupt. I had some really cool professors who were like, you don't have to get the book, it's a ripoff. Here's a book that you can get from the library that's not a textbook, but you can read about stuff. Those are cool professors. These other professors are wicked. Anyway, so the first one is changing perspectives on education and that it always pays. Young people beginning to recognize blue-collar work is in high demand. Hey, if you can go in 6 months and learn how to be an electrician or a plumber, and then work as an apprentice with electricians and plumbers, which is usually how those industries work, or a welder, you can learn welding in high school. You can learn mechanics in high school. There are a lot of people I know who learn how to be a mechanic because they have like a shop class in high school, right? So out of high school, you can go, and some mechanics make $30, $50 an hour. Some of them make more. Actually, it depends on the cars you service. If you service, let's say, the really expensive cars, you can charge a lot more, right? Number 2, a major recession or depression hurting the ability to pay back student loans. Some fail to realize that QE was to assist with this. No real earnings, though. If they didn't do QE, these students wouldn't have had jobs, and they wouldn't have been able to pay back their student loans, right? So what would have happened? Massive crisis. That's why people don't realize that. So the Federal Reserve, it's not that they're trying to control the business cycle. They can't take the punch bowl away. They can't. The reason is because of QE. Because if they do, this is going to happen, right? So that's why I'm saying there's a low probability that they're going to raise interest rates. And even if they do, there's a low probability that they're going to raise interest rates very high. It's going to kill these students, right? But there's going to come a point that people are going to completely lose faith in the Fed. Not a good time. You talk about a depression. Students who are struggling to pay back their student loans aren't able to prepare for that type of a depression. Think about it that way. Number 3, favorable laws toward discharging student loans in bankruptcy or forgiveness. After all, if you can just discharge it in bankruptcy, or you can just get student loan forgiveness, man, you can borrow as much money as you want, right? Problem is that who pays in bankruptcy? Taxpayers. Who pays in student loan forgiveness? Taxpayers. So these are not free. It seems like they're free for students, but again, there's a cost. And the cost is more people borrow, and they rationalize borrowing, and it just leads to more of an unsustainable future. By the way, if there was negative attitudes towards school, most young people wouldn't be going to school for degrees in theology. What do you do with theology? Or women's studies, or what's the other one, like psychology? What do you do with these majors? Who knows? So young people are discouraged by negative news. This is another sign towards education, such as stories like, I struggled to pay back my student loans and all I ended was with a $35,000 a year career. You're seeing this more prevalently. 5 years ago, you didn't see this at all. The media, especially Catherine Ramble at the New York Times, she was at the New York Times at the time. She was the cheerleader for education. Rah, rah, chicka, chicka, rah, rah. Yeah, education is good, yeah. Except the problem is that, again, while she was writing that, there were areas in the economy that were growing and growing faster that didn't require college degrees. Of course, she never highlighted those steps on the narrative, right? Number 5, free or cheap alternatives. If you can produce an alternative that's cheaper or is free, then people aren't going to go to school. They're going to learn through that, right? Well, that's going to that's going to pop the education bubble. Institutions are going to make less money. This is the big one here. Number 6, better schools in other countries. A lot of Americans don't realize this. When I was in college, about 5% of our student population was foreigners. The same college now, about almost 30% are. Why are they coming to America? Well, there's the it's not true, but there's the attitude. If they knew it wasn't true, there'd be a disaster. The attitude is that American universities are better than every other university in the world. It's not true, right? They're restricting freedom of speech. They're limiting free thought. These are not good universities. But foreigners think they are. And as long as that perception exists, you're going to have a demand. Imagine, though, if foreigners said no more U.S. universities. And so these universities that have, let's say, 20 to 30% of the student population, foreigners, what happens? Boom! They get hit, right? They're either going to have to raise tuition or they're going to have to start cutting staff. So these are the 6 trends to watch for. They probably won't all happen at the same time. You may see derivatives. And again, I would expect that if a recession starts to return, the Federal Reserve will print money like crazy. They're eventually going to cause a loss of faith in them. They have to, because they're basically in a pickle where they cannot keep interest rates high for a long period of time. They just can't. And so, but the problem is if they were to do that, let's say, they're going to cause a problem with students. It's a very tight situation, and we'll all see this come to pass. But when you see these signs start to occur, you know there's times, and that's when, if you want to take bets out against education, that may be something that I do, or that may be something that you start to see ETFs all of a sudden that are doing that. This is where to go. Again, as far as people who are like, well, you shouldn't short companies, blah, blah, blah. Well, now hold on. They've been ripping off students right and left. So you get what's coming to you if you go around ripping people off all the time.